All right, welcome. The last meeting of this council. Nalakadich wajak mort kayan karak najit nija walila puja. We're Jinang wajak kadijin, we're Nyiting Bula Yeye. We acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walyalup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. We have Councillor Thompson on leave of absence, unfortunately, but everyone else is here tonight. I don't know, are there any applications for leaves of absence? Oh, yeah, probably not from some of you. Any disclosures of interest from members? No. So responses taken on notice at the ordinary meeting of council on the 27th of September will be answered within the minutes of this meeting. We have one question for public question time, and it wouldn't be public question time if it wasn't Ian Kerr. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to speak on the council meeting's structure review, which is on the agenda for tonight, but another matter has arisen today, which is very urgent. So I would seek leave to circulate a document about the council meeting structure review and speak to the other item.
Sure.
The other item is the City of Fremantle elections. And as you will be aware, incorrect ballot papers were initially sent out to Central and Coastal Ward electors, and correct ballot papers were subsequently sent to arrive in mailboxes from Monday the 2nd of October. However, in the Electoral Commission's reporting of the returns of ballot papers, there are continual inconsistencies and or errors in the reported figures for both Central and Coastal wards. I've been talking with both the WA Electoral Commission and the City of Fremantle in an attempt to establish why these problems have been arising. And to be fair, staff of both the WAEC and the City of Fremantle have been very helpful, but their responses do not satisfactorily explain or address the identified problems. Somewhat confusingly, the explanations are also inconsistent. Now, according to the WA Electoral Commission, the reason 1,094 Central Ward votes and 1,286 Coastal Ward votes disappeared in the table that was produced for the 10th of October was that they had erroneously, and apparently from the beginning, been entering the previous day's cumulative total as the received packages on the following day. That's bad enough, except that that doesn't accord with the numbers that are actually in the daily tables for one day after another, and do not explain why the errors only occur for Central and Coastal wards of Fremantle and not for other wards nor for other local governments. According to the City of Fremantle, on advice from the WA Electoral Commission, the reason for the disappearance of 1,094 Central Ward votes and 1,286 Coastal Ward votes was that WAEC had erroneously been including invalid votes, including wrong ballot papers sent to electors in those wards and returned to the WAEC, and these had now been excluded from the total. Now, even if those explanations are somehow correct, they still do not explain the discrepancies in the data. And I suspect at this stage it's probably impossible to unravel the sources of errors and inconsistencies, let alone correct them. In which case it may be that the only option is actually to rerun the election for those wards at the WAEC's costs, one would hope. But then there's also the costs incurred by candidates, and the question then is who will reimburse them? We'll be keeping an eye on those figures and hopefully getting some more information from the WAEC. But for council, whatever the composition it is, it may well be that Central and Coastal wards are likely to be unrepresented for some time after the election. Now, I have another document here which I would seek leave to circulate, which does have the detailed tabulations that I referred to. So if that could be circulated as well, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, if you want to hand that to Melody. I mean, obviously, we're not the WAEC. I'm happy if the CEO's got any comment he wishes to make, but I imagine we are acting fairly much on advice.
Through the Chair, I can make a comment. We did contact the Electoral Commission today because we also noticed the number of returned ballots had halved, or the percentage had halved from yesterday's figures. Their response to the city today was that through Australia Post, they were counting some returned ballot papers that were now considered informal because they were part of the original postal allocation. So that is their official line that they've given us today. So we see today, at the start of the day, the numbers of returned ballot papers for the coastal and central wards halved from about 33 and 32% down to around 15, 16%. Looking at them now, they've raised up today's figures as well, back up to 17. So we'll continue to speak to them about that, but that was the official response that we'd received today.
Thank you. We'll carry on through the agenda. I don't know of any petitions or deputations, special deputations or presentations. So I will move that we confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council dated 27th of September. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Moughlin. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That brings us to elected member communications. So I'll have a few things to say about some retiring elected members, and they may wish to say something in response. Before I do that, though, I wanted to note the passing of former councillor Henty Farrar. I think, as is unsurprising, Rule Loop has put it in a nutshell very well, as he often does, saying that Henty was really passionate about Fremantle preserving our heritage, but he was also pragmatic about the need for progress and modern development. So for those of us who didn't serve with Henty, he was elected to council in 1988, representing the people of Beaconsfield Ward, and he served for 10 years in that role. And he was also former president and vice president of the Fremantle Society. For 38 years, which in these days is very unusual, he was employed by the Department of Lands, and later in life became a consultant across a wide range of Crown land dealings throughout WA. He'll be missed at the Royal Fremantle Golf Club, where he was a keen golfer, an active member. His passing last Wednesday was only 3 months after being diagnosed with a brain tumour. He was 73 years old, and we send our most sincere condolences to his wife, children and grandchildren, and he'll be remembered at a service at Fremantle Cemetery at 2 p.m. on Wednesday the 18th of October. So before I go to retiring elected members, are there any other elected member communications? Yep, Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't give notice of this. Apologies for that. I also wanted to note the passing of Paul Jacobs. Paul is the person, the face behind the lasagna bake-offs. Passed away on Sunday, also of a brain tumour. He had been sick with cancers for some time, but obviously something went wrong, and it was a very sudden decline, and very sad for all of the people in South Fremantle. And I just wanted to pay my respects, because Paul was a bigger than life in terms of his contribution in community. The Lasagna Bake Off, as people know, has been going for many years, and he and his wife Jenny have been very instrumental in keeping that running. And the people of Lily Street were all out in the street talking to each other about Paul's life and also his passing. So my condolences to Jenny and to his many kids and grandkids.
That is genuinely very sad news, of which I was not aware. So, Valet Paul, and a great artist as well. So he'll be missed for a lot of reasons. All right, it's quite sombre. If I get emotional during this bit. Anyway. So we have 3 retiring councillors tonight, and of course we wish those who are contesting elections the best of luck. But those who have chosen not to go round again, Councillors Groom, Pemberton and Jones, I'd like to say a few words about. And we've had some tributes, I think, at committee meetings along the way as well. So Councillor Groom only served with us for 4 years, 2019 to 2023. The impact I think she's had during those 4 years means that they've been an incredibly good investment, particularly for the City of Fremantle, hopefully for Councillor Groom herself too. I think where I really first started seeing Councillor Groom's amazing skill in governance, in facilitation, in strategic thinking was actually during the COVID recovery period. So not long after we had the new council, suddenly we were in this situation where we were out engaging with various sections of the community about what COVID was meaning for their sectors, for their people, for their clubs. And Councillor Groom, if I'm right, chaired our community sort of engagement, COVID recovery engagement group, and did an incredible job there. And I think suddenly went from being someone who not so many people knew to someone who a lot of people went, wow, this woman's a force to be reckoned with. She's also served, in other sort of critical areas that use her skills, not just planning, although in planning I think she is the person we turn to put a whole lot of thoughts together into a coherent, strategic and government-ready submission. Yeah, hard to replace, Councillor Groom. But also through Audit and Risk, a committee that, maybe doesn't get the consideration that it should, but is absolutely so crucial to everything that we do and to good governance. And I think Councillor Groom's contribution to that has been, not only valuable for us as a governance body, but for the staff as well to sort of have that considered input. She's given us a new awareness about climate risk and resilience and around our role in emergency management, and some things certainly that I didn't know until I spoke to Councillor Groom about her professional experience in that area. She was also there, I felt, at a critical point with the strategic community plan where we needed to decide, did we do your bog standard compliance strategic community plan, or did we want to push ourselves in a different direction? And I think, the dividends that's paid in terms of the number of people who were engaged through that process is absolutely huge. So I'll never forget, I guess, that impact that Councillor Groom's had. I think we could say this of all of our councillors tonight, but not a good time for a coughing fit. Councillor Groom's opinions, when they're formed, are always worth hearing. Because I'm losing my voice just for a moment, I might go to Councillor Groom to respond.
Thank you, Mayor, for your kind words. It's certainly been a privilege to serve on this council that I believe has some really rare qualities. And it wasn't an easy decision to leave, but unfortunately my work went into something of a growth industry, and when disasters hit, it doesn't leave much time for other things. And I have really felt this year that I haven't been able to bring to the role the full focus and energy and time that has been required. So I am very humbled by the kind words, because I've found that balance really difficult this year. I've really enjoyed the respectful and collaborative conduct of my fellow councillors. Our capacity and willingness as a group to have really robust conversations, to listen to each other, to be respectful to community and to staff, and then to continue to work together despite differences of views is really a hallmark of this council. And really, I kind of encourage incoming members and returning members and the community to keep conversing in that tone, because it's what allows us to move through the really difficult matters that we have to deal with and land positions that are not just populist or reactive, but are the right decisions for the community in the long term and for this council. And I do want to acknowledge the partnership of staff. Our staff treat us with kind of amazing respect and goodwill, and to continue to persevere when we really struggle with and grapple with the issues. They deal with us when we get grumpy with them, and they keep being nice to us, which is really, really helpful. And, you know, as with the councillors, you can see their commitment to the common good of the community, and that's why they keep showing up and coming to work, and that makes our job so much easier. It's been a really challenging term, as Hannah said. It was only kind of 3 months in that we suddenly realised that there was a pandemic heading to us, and kind of the whole structure of council that myself as a new councillor, and I know some of my new colleagues were really just starting to get our head around how does this place work, and the whole place started working really differently. And that's when I really saw the power of our staff, because they just stepped into that so quickly, shifted gears, and that focus on community was extraordinary, and kind of working with us really differently to get those outcomes. So it was a good time. I think it strengthened council, but it has left some kind of highlighted and exacerbated some of the structural challenges of council. And again, for anyone incoming, this council is not faced with easy decisions. There is no nice bucket of money to kind of reach into that challenge of the ageing infrastructure, the kind of high needs and expectations of our community, our role as Perth's second city, and all the visitation that goes with that, and therefore the infrastructure to support that visitation, spiralling costs of keeping infrastructure maintained and buying things and insuring things and all the bits that we have to do, and what is a much slower growth of our rate space than we had hoped, because Perth's development of new units and residential growth has not happened at the growth rate that might have been anticipated when the planning was done 10 years ago. So, you know, challenging times ahead for council to really lean into those decisions. Sometimes we've seen make unpopular decisions, and it's been really good to be able to work with a team that do that, and, you know, people making their choices at the ballot box, and incoming people cannot avoid those decisions. There's no magic fix. There's just some hard slog to get through it, and to kind of embrace the growth that will enable that to happen, which again comes with some complex and not necessarily populist decisions. So good luck, everyone. You know, there's more change ahead with the new structure and a constantly changing external environment. And yes, we can't ignore climate change and what that's going to mean for our communities. And really, Fremantle's a pretty resilient space, but as a council, we're going to need to keep investing in that, because, you know, we are in for some interesting times. So thank you, everyone, for the teaching that I have gained from you, for the friendship, for the trust. It's been great collaborating with you, and I'll be watching. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Groom. I don't know if we're allowed to give a round of applause, but I feel like it would be a good thing to do. Councillor Pemberton, 12 years, 2011 to 2023 for City Ward. You've served on planning, FPOL, SPT, back when it was. You've been a representative at JDAP with all that entails. You've probably been on committees that completely predated me, and I can't even list off. Looking back, I would like the data on this. I feel like Councillor Wainwright probably had it pipped you at the post, but the numbers of notices of motion that one councillor can put forward, you must have been pretty, yeah. So we're losing a lot of corporate knowledge, I think, with Councillor Pemberton's retirement. I think one of the things, when I look back at the list of things that Councillor Pemberton's been involved in, and I know this will be incomplete, is the authenticity with which she lives her life and then tries to influence policy. So whether that's through free alternative and affordable housing, whether that's through, you know, some of the early efforts in vacant shops and really looking at how can those be activated, but not just looking at policy, looking at the cappuccino strip and how can we get people out there. Whether that be improving resource recovery in the inner city, for multi-unit developments, reducing food waste, The climate emergency, electrifying everything, sustainable events. This is a not incomplete list, but it's still quite long. I really got to collaborate with Councillor Pemberton through the King Square, as it was, Place Activation Working Group, and I drew on this huge wealth of knowledge that she'd had through all the years of kind of trying to activate spaces that could be used better through the city. Cappuccino strip parties, parklets, all of those kind of things, and the bike network, even sort of in the last sort of weeks of Councillor Pemberton's service, to get the bicycle user group back out there again. We all have bikes, but I think Councillor Pemberton lives bikes in a way that not all of us can claim to do. So I think Councillor Pemberton's been a real keeper of the kind of progressive flame, and I suppose that does bring me to Councillor Pemberton's post-council life. I think she is looking forward to being able to walk down the street unaccosted and have conversations with people that are not about council, but I do wonder if dyeing her hair may be required for a level of anonymity, because she has been a beacon for advocacy and council more generally. So you'll be seriously missed, Councillor Pemberton. I think it's been an incredible period of service. So thank you very much, and I might continue on and see if you'd like to respond now.
I will. To quote my dad, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. Yeah, look, this has been a really amazing journey, challenging at times, that's for sure. But most of all, I really want to thank all of the people that I've worked with, and that's the staff as well as all the many elected members, and the members of the community as well, who I've had the privilege of engaging with really deeply through this job, because it's all taught me so much in so many different ways and so many different spheres. And I've decided not to name any names because there are actually so many, and I don't want to miss anyone out. But yeah, there's been so many great people that I've gotten to learn from through this role. I'll be forever grateful for the wealth of knowledge, inspiration and insight I've gleaned from many elected members, the staff, the stakeholders and community members. One thing I wanted to reflect on was that I recently read that stress is heightened when you have to make more decisions, and obviously the more complicated or difficult or significant the decision, the higher the level of stress. So I really pay my respects to everyone who I've shared this table with, and anyone who puts themselves forward to sit at this table, because it certainly is a challenge when your job is literally to make the decisions that can't be made by policy. And I want to thank everybody that I've shared this table with, and of course this table at North Fremantle, and this table when it was just sort of slightly over there in the old building. Because the respectful debate and the sharing of knowledge and different perspectives and insights have led to much better decisions for the city that we all love. Like many people who seek election, when I first came into this role, I was full of ideas and solutions that I thought, I'm going to get this done and I'm going to do this, that, the other. And then you start to learn that it's not that simple. And there are wider perspectives than your own bubble that you need to actually give due regard. And and then there's regulatory and legislation kind of aspects that come into it. And then of course you have to convince your colleagues around this table to actually agree and get it done. And it is a challenge. So I really want to remind everybody of this fact and what to look for in council candidates, because it's easy to say one thing, it's harder to actually make it happen, and you need someone who you believe can actually deliver that. I also wanted to point out that it's not the job of councillors just to simply point out problems. Like, yes, our job is to give oversight and to question things that don't look right and that need some further inquiry. But our job is to find the solutions and work collaboratively towards an outcome for the betterment of our city. And it's a really tough job. And so I thank everybody for actually putting in that effort and doing that. And I remind everybody that that is the core purpose of our role here, and it's a tough one, and it's worthy of thanks and respect. So yeah, you mentioned a few things that I've been involved in. I guess I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that stood out, sort of top of mind of the things that I am kind of most pleased to have contributed towards, because certainly they weren't my doing, but I played a role that I was really glad to have done. And that was the initial greening Fremantle strategy and some of that work that then led to the urban forest plan. I'm really, really proud of this council stopping Row 8. I think that was a really mammoth achievement, and now we just need the transit and the alternative transport options that needs to replace it. So that job is still to be done, but we did a good job there. The Freo alternative was certainly really exciting, groundbreaking work that I'm pleased to have been a part of, and I think forms a really important component towards the solution to the housing crisis we face. I know that its implementation has been patchy. The ability to implement it is very limited in the current structure, and I have requested a review so that we can look at how we can expand it further. But I also note that, you know, the state government's medium density housing codes actually speak very much to that, and I know we're an iteration from some of that work, and I do hope that the state government sees fit to implement it widely so that it can actually be delivered everywhere across our state, because it's the kind of housing that many people want to see and want to live in. Another one I'm really pleased about is the South Beach swimming zone. I'm very protective of that. If a boat comes inside those buoys, I have been known to yell at them. But I'm really pleased that we got that swimming zone for our community. It's a place I find very precious. I was also really pleased to establish the Walyalup Aboriginal Cultural Centre. And while I still think that the current location is not ideal, I think it's a really important facility to have in our community, and I do hope that it continues to grow and evolve and expand over time. I'm really glad that we adopted a RAP and that it was an ambitious one, and for the role that we played in Rethinking Australia Day. Even though I wasn't here for the actual vote that cancelled the fireworks, I was very much part of those conversations about saying, why are we doing this? And then finally, the project that you mentioned, Mayor, the renaming of what was then King Square, I feel confident now saying that that's something I've wanted to do long before I was on council, and I'm so glad we achieved it, and I think the outcome was wonderful. And lastly, I just want to say the shepherding of new redevelopment and the revitalisation of our beautiful city, it's been an incredible thing to be a part of and a terrifying thing to be a part of. And there's been many times where I've held my head in my hands and just thought, don't break it. Don't break the beautiful city we have. And I like how most things have come together so far, and I do think, you know, there's more to come. It is terrifying, but it's worth it, and it's going to deliver the kind of city we all want to live in the future. So finally, I just want to say this has been an amazing experience. I think of it now as a job where you get to know and fall in love with your city over and over again. And so for those that will sit at this table in the next council and those in the future, I wish you all well, because there is more work to be done. And I'll also just say, you've not seen the last of me. My first civic engagement in Fremantle was a submission on the design and redevelopment of what was then King Square when I was 7 years old. So you can bet I'm going to have something to say on the decisions coming in the future. But thank you to everybody I've worked with over the last 12 years, and thank you also to all the voters who put their faith in me, not once but 3 times. I'm very grateful for this experience.
And Councillor Bryn Jones. I actually had assumed Councillor Pemberton had the most years of service wrongly, because Councillor Jones served 1993 to 1999. I mean, look, there's nothing to say all of you couldn't come back. I'm just saying, because Councillor Jones then came back in 2015 to 2023, bringing it to 14 years of service. obviously, most recently, Councillor Jones has been our planning committee chair, and at a time when the decisions we make are in an environment that is increasingly fraught, and the consideration we need to put into those decisions in order to be compelling, that bar continues to be raised. And Councillor Jones has done an incredible job, always driving us to make decisions that have the most chance of having an impact, particularly where we have other levels of government making decisions. And his service through JDAP as well has certainly been a testament to that. He's also served on the International Relations Working Group, and I really appreciate some of the councillors who've been around for a little longer than I have when we have to sort of consider how we manage these international relationships and give them the due regard that we need to, and the consideration and the connection to some of those places. I think when I speak to people about Councillor Jones and how they've interacted with him and what they've noticed, the word that comes up the most is common sense. Just common sense. So it is almost like the questions that Councillor Jones asks are the ones that allow us to tap into often the way everyone would think about it. We might get quite caught up sometimes in, the council view of things, or what we know or what we don't know. Councillor Jones takes us often straight to that sort of the heart of the issue, and that's something we're greatly appreciative of. I noticed we did manage to find some archival material on Councillor Jones's initial election, and I was interested to see that the hat theme has been consistent, but the hat has evolved over time. So at dinner we'll share with you some classy pictures. There's a bit of pretty spunky pictures there, Councillor Jones, of a rather more a Cooper-like hat. We know you were very cross last time you were elected that the WAEC refused you the ability to wear your signature hat in your photograph, and it's lucky they recognised you without it and elected you again. I think one thing I just also want to mention about Councillor Jones is that his commitment to service and to service of the community doesn't sort of end here. So, I mean, I hope certainly Councillor Jones continues to be a stalwart of North Fremantle, but I also look at his family and their contribution more broadly to North Fremantle, and I think one of those legacies that you can have in terms of leading the way for other people to continue, whether that's through the social farm or the bolo or all the other things that happen in the community. I think that's a really precious impact that we all benefit from. So, Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you for those kind words. I did notice that somebody this year managed to wear a hat on their photograph, so they must have changed the rules. The rule actually came in because somebody did his photograph with something like a ferret on his head, and so they decided to change the rules after that, because I did actually complain. Look, it's been a great honour to serve for 14 years, and as I pointed out at my last planning committee, I realised it's for 20% of my life I've sat on the planning committee, which seems quite incredible. That's 20% of my whole life, not my adult life. And so miserable is my life that I sat on my veranda in Ubud last Wednesday and watched the planning committee on my iPad, and because I wanted to see if it was true. All these people say you can't tell what they're talking about, and they've got no idea. It was actually very clear. The sound's very clear. The picture was very clear, and I was actually very impressed with the intelligence and the nuanced conversations and the care that everyone took. So, having been on the planning committee for 14 years, I've never had the opportunity to watch one. So it was actually quite interesting. And what struck me was how everybody was treated, how each issue was treated so carefully to try and find a good outcome. And I think that's one of the challenges of planning is, on the one hand, you're dealing with people's hopes and dreams, like the biggest thing they've ever done in their life is build their house. And sometimes you have to tell them it's too big or it's in the wrong place, and that's quite difficult. Other times you're dealing with people who put their own self-interest first and totally disregard the neighbours and want to push the boundaries, and that's quite hard to deal with too. So it is probably one of the more demanding committees in that respect. What I would just make a point is I think all councillors from here on in have to get much more involved in planning issues. The council goes down to 10. If there's a rerun of the election, which I think is quite likely, it'll be down to 8 until about next February. That's how long it took for your one, isn't it? Not January. And I'll just make a couple of points. I mean, we don't do too badly out of JDAP. People might hate JDAP, but we actually do better with JDAP than most councils because our office has put an awful lot of work into the reports. We've got very sound policies. We've got very sound consultation. And we've got, if I may say, very good representation on the committee. We've had 2 5-0 refusals recently, which I don't think any other councillors had. The police station, I think, was pretty line ball, to be honest. But one of the things that's going to happen in the near future is of great concern is that to counter the accusations of conflict of interest with JDAP members, because they inevitably have them, because they work in the development industry, the plan is to make all JDAP members full-time salaried and they're not allowed to take on any other work. Now, that might seem like a good thing, but on the downside, if imagine being a full-time salaried JDAP member for 2 years and you refuse 5 things in those 2 years, and then your contract comes up for renewal. Basically, it's a ministerial appointment, and the whole point of JDAP is to get things approved. So it's unlikely your contract would be renewed. So I think that's quite a dangerous kind of step. And I have no qualms at all with our JDAP members that represent us. I know they make decisions we don't necessarily agree with, but I've always felt they've been fair and reasonable. But I think that change is going to be quite a significant one. And it does seem to me that the state government is hell-bent on taking the planning powers away from council, and it really is up to the council and the community, and more the community. The council, the state government takes no notice of councils, and local government, they sometimes take notice of communities. It's really up to everyone to really get onto that. Some of the decisions recently, the one in Cottesloe was incredible because the WAPC planning group actually recommended refusal of this apartment building, and then the WAPC ignored the advice and approved it, despite the chairman speaking against it and one of the local government reps speaking against it. So the state government design review committee advised against it. Their own officers advised against it. The chairman spoke against it. A local government rep, I think is a mayor of somewhere, who was on WAPC, spoke against it, and it was approved 6-2. And that's an apartment block on the seafront in Cottesloe. So that wasn't JDAP, that was the WAPC process, SDAU. So it's quite remarkable that you can go through this whole process and then at the very end, the final committee just ignores all the advice on anything. And the sole reason for the SDAU process, I'm sorry to go on about this, but I do think it's the most important issue facing Fremantle for the next 10 years, is economic development. The horrendous tower at the end of the Stirling Bridge, which is, I think, 18 stories. It actually said in their decision, we've approved it because they're going to spend $250 million and employ 300 people. That's it. Now, they can't find 300 people to employ, but that's another issue. And the other thing about the Cottesloe one is that the person putting in the application had already got a similar thing approved previously and hadn't built it within the 2-year time period, asked for an extension on the same project. So in the space of one meeting, he got a new project and a 2-year extension on his old project, which he hadn't done yet. So to me, the whole thing is a bit of a farce. But anyway, I do think I dwell on that because I think it's the key issue. Just I'd like to mention the finances. It always comes up with finances at election time, and people come up with ideas that if I'm on council, with some magical thinking, I can fix all this. I'm not sure how. I mean, I've been on council for 14 years. I've probably worked with 100 different elected members. Amongst them, some almost entirely very intelligent people, very well connected, a whole wide range of skills and professions and background. Nobody's yet found the solution because the issues in Fremantle are quite simple. I think there's the low population, the number of heritage assets in the state, many of which are state-owned or council-owned that we have to maintain, properties that don't pay rates, which include state properties, religious properties, educational properties, charities, and a massive ageing asset base of the council itself. So with a population of 40,000, it is simply impossible. There is no solution, in my view, to Fremantle's finances unless we expand the population, which will take a long time. We do boundary reform, which is unlikely, you'd have to say, or the state government recognises the regional role of Fremantle and puts in, I'd say you need something like $5 to $10 million every year forever to look after the state assets and the regional assets and the heritage assets and accept the fact the number of non-rateable properties we have. And if no matter what magical thinking people come with into the elections, nobody is going to fix this problem. You know, you can't have 10% rate rise every year. That won't even fix it. Population possibly, but that's going to take 10 years. So the suggestion that somehow, you know, elect me and I'll fix the problem, I've got the skills. You know, there's no shortage of skills. There's just a shortage of money. So I've gone on a little bit, but I think they're the two most important things facing Fremantle for the next 10 years. And thank you to everyone that's, particularly the planning committee and the planning staff that's worked with us, and to all the colleagues I've worked with over the years. And I wish you all the best in the future. I do fear the elections will get rerun, so it'll be down to 8 councillors for a few months. That'll be good practice for when it's 8 councillors all the time. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Because I wasn't the only mayor that these 3 councillors served with, I also just asked the former mayor to give me any thoughts that he had. So from former Mayor Brad Pettit, he said, these councillors all demonstrated the best of what our community can hope for in a local representative. They all worked hard, came to council meetings with an open mind, willing to listen to the staff, community and fellow elected members, and had the courage to make often hard decisions to make Freo better. I thank them for that. So thank you all again. All right, we do have an actual council agenda tonight. So we will go to that and to the planning committee recommendations. So Councillor Jones. Oh yeah, you're right. It sounds like planning, but it's not. So we'll go to the Henderson Street item. As I might flag later, I think it would be good practice for us to move to not me moving everything and getting the last word. So would anyone like to move the officer's recommendation for Councillor Jones and seconded by Councillor Lang? Councillor Jones.
Yes, I don't want to say very much on this, but I think it's a modification to something that's already approved. So it's a JDAP Form 1, it's called. It's considered a minor amendment to an already approved thing. I'd just like to say I was really very pleased and surprised that Silverleaf found a way of using those prison officers' barracks, because that area is an absolutely fabulous building, but almost impossible to see any modern use for it. So the idea they've come up with, I guess it's something like knocking every 3 rooms into 2 and putting bathrooms in the middle room for the 2 other rooms. They're very small. There were single men's quarters for police officers, and there are about 48 of them. If anybody's not been around the back, you know, and looked at the second quadrangle, it is really quite amazing. And that, I understand, will all come under single management. So with the single management, you will have the 5-story hotel, the warders' cottages, and these ones, which I imagine will be much more affordable. So you've got a fantastic resource all centred around the courthouse, bang in the middle of Fremantle, with a really family-friendly area, because a lot of those rooms will open onto the grass area, the playground, and the outdoor area of the courthouse. So there is a little bit of compromise of some of the heritage by knocking the hole through to get the car parking, and that's really the only issue that is of concern. But I think on balance, with the quality of the development, I think that's acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Lang as seconder. Is there any further discussion on the item? No. Oh, Councillor Lorver. Sorry, it's sticking up in the air.
Yeah, thank you. And I kind of went back and forth as to whether or not I wanted to try to make this a little bit better, but the suggestions that I would have would be kind of contrary to a lot of what's actually in the officer's recommendation. So I'm really struggling with the the knocking down of the heritage wall to create a new vehicle access way off Perry Street, because it's a part of the fabric that we'll just never get back to put more cars in and out of this place. You know, it is a great development, and I do think that it will be really good for this part of Fremantle. But in the past 2 years, I wasn't here in 2018 when it was first approved, but in the past 2 years, we've given them that little triangle car park there on the corner to create a nice entryway into the development, and so we're losing that, you know, parking revenue. And now we're supposed to then create a whole new entrance off of Perry Street that currently doesn't exist. So there'll be vehicle movements in and out. And if you actually look at the traffic impact statement that was submitted that said everything's going to be sweet on this, it includes the public car park there on the triangle corner. It includes the public parking on Henderson Street, which is no longer going to be there after Twiggy builds his hotel. And it also includes the cat bus, which is no longer part of the fabric of Fremantle. So I just think that it is a great development. There's a lot in here that I could approve. I mean, I would vote in favor of several of these dot points that we're being asked to amend. I think a lot of them would be really wonderful to see, but I'm struggling with actually approving it because it's, you know, we lose the wall, we create a whole new vehicle access point, which wasn't in the previous plans at all. And I think that we've handed over a car park that currently generates revenue to create a more pedestrian and vehicle interface on that corner already. And I just don't see this really working on Perry Street. So I'm happy to hear what other councilors have to say, but right now I'm going to struggle to approve this in its entirety. Thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Pemberton.
I share Councillor Lover's concerns, and I did look really hard at this, and I certainly recognise and totally agree that the overall development is a really good outcome for Freo. Whether or not we need to punch through, you know, intact heritage fabric just to create a more, I mean, the thing that troubled me in the report and in the various supporting documentations and so on was the argument they were putting forward for the justification for the destruction of the heritage fabric was because it would make the hotel viable. Now, finances are not a planning consideration. I've been told this many times, time and time again, and they've not, you know, and viable to me means money. It means whether or not it's financially viable. They've not used the word finance, but that's what they're talking about. And so to me, that makes it really hard to justify. I did actually try engaging with the applicant, and I got some information from staff around the plans for that forecourt on William Street because, like Councillor Lorver said, I had always imagined that was the drop-off point. That was the entry statement for the hotel, and whether or not they have another tenancy out front or whatever doesn't matter, but that was sort of where you got picked up and dropped off, and you'd wander into this beautiful wonderland of, you know, heritage interpretation and new F&B and so on. I also worry about, you know, Parry Street as it currently is. I mean, we talk about it as sort of our ring road. It's really hard to cross at various points, particularly along there. So having another kind of car access and so on. I note that it is only left in, left out, but also that presents additional challenges in itself in the sense that you've got to be coming from the south or you've got to circle the whole entire CBD to get to be able to enter it, which doesn't entirely make sense. I did request a site visit to be able to talk to the applicants about it. I didn't, well, I got a response from one of them who said he wasn't working on the project. The other one I happened to run into outside Woolies and spoke to him, and he said he was busy and wasn't particularly interested in facilitating a site visit, and that it was complicated because, you know, it involved hard hats and signing in and signing out and so on. And unfortunately, I just got the feeling like he didn't really care because JDAP's going to make the decision and we can say whatever we want. So again, speaking to Councillor Jones's point, I think you're spot on, which is that the planning controls are being taken away from local government. And so I didn't push any harder, but am not inclined to support that aspect of this request. I also noted on some of the designs and drawings, it actually looked like some of the family-friendly parkland in the middle is going to be converted into parking. So yeah, we're actually losing some of that, you know, green space that was going to enhance and soften and add, you know, experiential value to the development overall. And I think the combination of those things means that I can't support it.
All right. Can I just get officer comment on that final piece around something being car parking that wasn't previously or was shown as a green space? Sorry, I appreciate you don't have a microphone over there. Chloe, perhaps you can borrow one.
Through you, Chair, there have been a number of variations to this application. So there are a number of different iterations of this one. Where the car park is proposed in this variation is where it's approved to be. So really all that's changing is the access road through the building. So instead of vehicles going in and out through the car park next to the courthouse, they'll come in off Parry and out through Queen. And one of the main reasons for that is just to allow that flow through, acknowledging that the area is a little bit limited in terms of its traffic flow at the moment, particularly on a busy Friday and the likes. But as far as we can tell, there's no significant changes to the amount of green space being proposed as part of it. It's really the heritage fabric that changes.
Thank you. Councillors? Further speakers? I would just note we've got no alternative or amendments on the table. So, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I will be supporting this, but I wanted to kind of explain why. This, interestingly, Councillor Jones mentioned that period of time when I wasn't on council because I had my election quashed. This first approval was that period, and I remember leaving council when it was starting to get interesting as to what would happen on this site, and excited by that, and of course missed the 5 months of deliberations and came back just as JDAP approved it. And that frustrated me because I, as an architect, felt strongly that the original building actually had quite a lot of merit about it and was one of the sort of suite of buildings that was designed by that architect who did many of the buildings at UWA, and just felt it had been given lip service, really. And of course, it was a building that was in scale and very much tried to insert a modern building into a very important heritage site. And we've subsequently seen lots of intervention into that site. And I absolutely welcome the activation that it's bringing, but have questioned in my mind some of the decisions, the subtlety of some of the designs. The site, unfortunately, now has had so many iterations that it's starting to look piecemeal rather than a beautifully harmonious, integrated solution for a very important site. But that's not what we're dealing with. This application is an amendment to an amendment to an amendment. It's part of the problem, but on its own, it is a reasonable proposal, and I will support it based on that. Just talking to Councillor Pemberton's comment, there was an iteration where half of the courtyard, or about 40% of the courtyard, was going to be given over to landscaping and hardscaping rather than just parking. And so there have been multiple iterations of that, and it does feel a little bit compromising that the whole internal courtyard really is functionally parking. And I hope that the developer can make sure that it's very much a naked urban space in there, and it doesn't just feel like a bitumised car park, that it actually feels like a public space where you can kind of like leave your car, but you can also do a whole bunch of other things if you want, so that it's flexible into the future in terms of how it gets utilised, and that the tree planting is as shown on the drawings and actually creates that courtyard that we would all like to see. I have some reservations about the sight lines coming in and out of Parry Street, and I'll deal with those perhaps a little bit more when it gets to JDAP. But other than that, the reality is, as a small amendment in its own right, I think the officers have got the recommendation right.
Councillors? Yep.
This is for staff. I just wondering, is there? I didn't see anything in the what's being proposed. Any traffic treatments that are proposed to stop cars from traveling south on Perry Street and turning right into the hotel, because this is a hotel, so people are from out of town that be coming from all different ways. Was there anything that was proposed to be put in the road to stop that action from occurring?
Thanks.
Through you, Chair, there is a draft condition in there that does talk to the fact that there probably will need to be some treatments in the road reservation where the access is proposed as actually a crossing point in the median as well. So there is some work they'll have to do. And when we did go out on site with the applicants, they acknowledged that that would be a little bit of a complication. So that is a condition of approval that we would like them to make sure that that median is dealt with in particular.
And another question for Chloe.
Sorry, Chloe. Question is whether or not the applicant is aware that our urban design for that area indicates the removal of the roundabout, which would actually make coming in from the east, i.e. turning right, which can't happen, but coming into that car park, as Councillor Pemberton said, they might need to go a very long way round before they can turn around and come back in the right direction. So I guess, have we made the applicant aware of the future configuration of the road?
Through you, Chair, I would have to take that one on notice. I'm not sure if that has come up in the discussions to do with the Triangle car park and what that future might look like, but I can look into that and make sure we've got that reviewed before JDAP.
Thank you. So on the officer recommendation, look, I mean, I went out on site. There was a site visit for the planning committee a while back. I remember Councillor Jones was there. I don't remember who else was there. Looking particularly at this sort of proposal. It's not perfect, but I think the balance between having one point to come in and one point to come out, and then how you can increase the sort of functionality of that car park, but also the amenity, the trees. So, you know, if you've got cars going in and out one direction, you obviously need to create a lot more sort of place for cars to be able to pass each other in the car park. I think the other thing, sort of going back to, I guess, as Councillor Sullivan has said, this is an amendment to an amendment to an amendment. But if we go back in history to the point where access was looking like it would be closer down to where the Triangle car park is now, I think when we look at that in the context of the Oval redevelopment, I'm less comfortable with trying to force more and more traffic through that area, particularly if we could see that area along the Oval and between the markets as being a real pedestrian zone, and kind of having seen some of the bigger football games recently with huge numbers of people trying to get through the gates. I think we have to consider how that functions as a kind of very shared space. So if that were the only access point for that development, I think we would be concerned. I think we would also be concerned if there wasn't some internal parking, because it is, you know, obviously a fairly busy area. So I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation. It's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that you weren't able to get out on site and have a look. But you know, it is working within existing fabric, and there's a limit to how many different things you can do on the site. All right. So, Councillor Jones, did you wish to close? No. All right. So I will put it to a vote. All those in favour? And against? Councillors Lorver, Pemberton and Vusic against. That's carried. Okay. To our next C item, the council meeting structure review. Does someone wish to move the officer recommendation? I do notice there's an amendment and an alternative, but I think we might start with the officer recommendation, Councillor Archibald, and seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Councillor Archibald.
Sorry. I don't wish to speak to it at this point. I was just moving it so we could get it on the table.
No worries. It's on the table. All right, councillors. So on the officer recommendation, are there any speakers? Yep, Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a procedural question, if I may, because my amendment is to expand the trial from 6 to 12 months, and my intention behind that was to apply that to whatever model does get up. So if I'd like to apply to this existing one or move it eventually, but if it does not get approved, I would also like to preserve to put it on the next one because the reasoning is the same. Is that?
So my understanding is if this recommendation were not approved, we have an alternative recommendation, and you would be able to move amendments to the alternative recommendation at that time. Yeah. But if there are no other speakers, you're welcome to go to that proposed amendment.
Great. Yeah, just to move the amendment, it just changes from 6 to 12 months. We'll get a report back after 6.
Okay. And, do we have a second of that? You have to wait till after the oh. Okay, so we've got a seconder for that in Councillor Moughlin. So on the amendment, did you wish to speak further to it? No?
Straightforward.
Okay. Who wants to speak on the amendment? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I had sort of made, I guess, in some email exchanges, the comment that I'm going to make now. I totally understand the principle of what Councillor Lorber is putting forward, but I also accept that a 6-month trial means that we will be able to get a report back in a really timely manner. I mean, I actually think 6 months could be too long. If it's not working, we're going to want to change it sooner. If it is working, then it will just be tick and flick. In the sense, I think we will know that earlier rather than later anyway, and that's why I was comfortable with 6 months. I think setting it out to 12 months kind of raises this sort of expectation that, well, we don't need to look at it until the end of that period. And to be honest, 12 months out is 12 months before we'll have to change everything again. So I'd rather get to that point in 6 months or even 3 months' time to say, yes, it's working, no, it's not working. The reason being is it's not so much whether we have option 2 or option 3. It's what happens behind those structures and in all of the different ways that we do our deliberations. It's what happens behind those structures that is going to be really important and that we're going to really need to focus on. So it's all of the IEMs, it's all of the workshops, it's all of the working groups, it's all of the ways that we do business and the ways in which the community get to see those conversations. That's going to be critically important when we look at changing a structure. And I would like us to get there much sooner and test that and really make sure that those behind the scenes structures are dealt with sooner rather than later.
Councillor Moughlin.
Thank you. Just a question for officers. Regardless of the formal time frame that we have for review, if we felt that it wasn't working after 3 months, as an example, is there the opportunity to make change at that point in time?
Through the chair, look, we'll be engaging with council all the way through, I expect. Just to clarify in the report, the reason we suggested a 6-month review is because that did line up with our delegation review as well. So our opinion was, if it was working and functioning, we'd also adjust maybe some of the delegations to allow it to perform better as well. We would probably still like to bring something back at the 6-month mark regardless. So our intention would be if this amendment got up, we would still come back at the 6-month stage anyway and talk about how it was going. But I would expect there'd be continuous dialogue, especially in the early stages.
Councillor Jones on the amendment.
Look, this obviously won't affect me directly, but I think one point I'd make, it seems sensible to choose a method now that has a fighting chance of working when in 2 years' time when you get down to 8 councillors. And I can't see any scenario where you can have a planning committee with 8 councillors and a mayor with any delegation. It seems sensible to me to say you have 2 meetings. One is primarily planning, but you can still refer it to the next one, and one is primarily not planning, with the option of referring it to the next one. So having 2 council meetings every fortnight, one every fortnight, is a scenario that can work in 2 years' time as well as now. I don't see any point having a system now and then change it again in 2 years' time. And I can't see how you can have delegation with a committee of less than everybody when you get down to 8. So,
Councillor Kamada.
Thank you, Mayor Fitzhardy. Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Jones's comments and also what Councillor Sullivan has said. I think as we move towards 8 councillors, we need to adjust what we're doing, and the quicker we can get to a position that accommodates the new structures or the new numbers that we have in place, I think the better. Also, to support what Ian Kerr spoke about today, I think the challenge will also be to ensure that we have the ongoing community engagement and include and try and bring the public along with us on this journey. Thank you.
I will just remind everyone that we are on an amendment that talks about 6 months versus 12 months. If Councillor Thompson was here, he would have pulled you all into line by now. But Councillor Lang, I presume you are on the amendment.
Yeah, it is on the amendment. And it does link back to option 3 as well. I do support the 2 council meetings per month. At the moment, they make sense to me. One meeting could be a more planning focus, the other could be more council item focused, or vice versa. But that's at the moment, it does make sense to me. It does look like it works, but I fear the risk of extending the 12 months if we can't change something sooner. If something that we're unaware of pops up and we can't change it, that's a risk for us. So that's why I lean more towards the 6-month option. I think it gives us more flexibility, and as Councillor Sullivan said, it's a tick and flick scenario at that point.
Councillor Lorver to close on the amendment.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments from all the colleagues here. And this is just such a small amendment, and I really do appreciate your comments on it. There are a lot more things that are going to be more important than whether this is 6 or 12 months, meaning our meeting procedures, our standing orders, all those kinds of things, and how we facilitate debate in this chamber, that I think. But the reason for the 12-month trial, I feel, is important because that gets us through a full cycle. We get through all the 5-week months, we get through all the school holidays, we get through all these different periods where there are ebbs and flows to council business, as I've learned over the past 2 years. And we know that things may not work, or they may work fine over the quiet Christmas school holidays in January, but it may not work very well in September when we get a rush of planning items. So the 12-month trial, to me, just gets us through an entire year. It's not committing us one way or the other, but it just basically says, let's get through an entire year and see how it goes. And as Councillor Moughlin asked the question, we can always change things later. But there are details that I feel will take longer than 6 months to work out, and that is, like I said, the meeting procedures and the standing orders that will, I think, that won't be a tick and flick after 6 months. We'll just kind of be figuring out what actually is going to work or might work, or what we might want to change. When I was a kid, there was an album that I lived with these other kids, basically, and I hated this album. It was the worst album ever, and they would play it nonstop, and I did not like it, not one bit. And it wasn't until like about 8 or 10 years later that I listened to that album. It's like one of my favorite albums now of all time. It took a long time for it to grow on me. So I just think having a little bit more time for the 2 council meetings to grow on us, it may turn out that that's actually a worthwhile thing where we may not know in 6 months. So hopefully we can do this, but we'll do whatever we decide. So 12 months to me makes sense. If it doesn't make sense to everyone else, we'll do 6.
Okay, so I'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? Yep. I'll give you some support, Pen. And against? And so that's Laura and Fitzharding for, and everyone else against. So that's lost. So back to the item now as not amended. Councillor Vusic, I think you wanted to speak before we went to the amendment.
Yeah, sorry. Look, I think the 6-month trial would be a good option. I know I had a leave of absence last month, so I wasn't here for some of the discussion on this item. I think some of the data that's been provided by the officers has been really good. However, I think there is a lot of good things about the committee structure. So a risk management type of analysis might have been an additional exercise which would have perhaps brought out all the things that really work well for us in a committee and using the committee structure, and also the things that didn't and where the gaps were. And I think sometimes you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that's the danger you have with this particular change. Out of the options, I think option 2 it is better. I'd like to see the Audit and Risk Management Committee to have more prominence rather than 3 monthly. And I think it's a really good, I don't know how we would do planning unless we have a planning meeting and separately on its own. So it's an improvement, but I would have also liked to have seen what really worked well with our committees and how we could have incorporated that in the new structure.
Thank you. Councillor Jones?
I've got a question. I can't find anywhere in option 2 where it talks about what the size of the planning committee would be, because I think that's quite critical to the.
All right. So one of the officers.
Look, at this stage, I don't think we've really landed on that, although it can be any size it wants to be. So it can be the whole council and the mayor, or it can be a small substructure of that.
Thanks. I'll speak on that later then. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Grimm.
I've got a question, and I do feel like it's not up to me to speak on this matter too much. But I just note that the report is due in June, which is actually 8 months. So I'm not sure whether that's just a kind of into the year cycle a typo, but I feel like if that's the trigger for council to review this structure, that's locking in for a lot longer than was intended. Officers? Yeah, okay. Yep.
So if there is some comment around the timeline, I mean, I know this is trying to tie in with delegations review, perhaps managed governance, you can speak.
So through the chair, just to answer your question, so that's excluding January because we have no meetings in January. And obviously we're bringing it back in June, so the trial is for 6 months and we'll review it in the first meeting in June.
All right. So, Councillor Pemberton.
I just have a couple of questions, and it's largely based on the debate and discussion that has taken place so far here and by email and in the meetings and so on. So the comment around the idea of one of the meetings each month being primarily planning items and one of the meetings being other items is not documented anywhere. And I just wonder if that needs to be articulated for clarity, whether or not it's a minor amendment or whether or not it's unnecessary because we've spoken to it. But it seems to, I mean, that approach sounds logical to me, because even though I won't be there, it does worry me, the idea of potentially ending up with like 2 hours of really difficult planning, debate and discussion and issues and so on, and then the really strategic issues being left to late in the evening when everybody's tired and just wants to go home. So I just wonder if formalising that in some way is worthwhile. And I also wonder whether or not we've sort of talked also about the potential loss of flexibility in our ability to sort of debate things fully through the OCM standing orders. And it's been referenced that, you know, those standing orders can be relaxed and so on. So just whether or not we need documentation of those two factors that are currently influencing the thinking.
All right. So on your first point, I'll ask that we kind of try and draft something up that could be considered fairly minor to capture that. And maybe I'll speak a little bit to your second point when I speak. But Councillor Moughlin.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm supportive of the officer's recommendation. I feel it provides us with enough space to make appropriate decisions, and to the point that Councillor Pemberton spoke about, the opportunity and the challenge for the person in the chair is to support the meeting, and maybe it means that there is a different role for the chair as part of an ordinary council meeting compared to what there currently is. So I think with the correct guidance and support that it would enable us to work. I'm not too sure if we need to codify the fact that one needs to look more so at planning. I would like to think that we enable the flexibility of staff to manage that appropriately as and when agenda items are in place, and that the expectation of the council is that we have the right amount of time and thinking to be able to deal with items. But I think there's most probably a practice for elected members too, as part of an ordinary council meeting, which is different to planning committee to committees, and I think it might actually sharpen our focus and ensure that we deal with matters appropriately and in a reasonable time frame as well. So, yeah, fully supportive of the approach.
All right, I might see if we've got some words that we can have a look at to Councillor Pemberton's point. How does that fit with your thinking? Yeah. I'll just get the manager governance to comment on that.
As mentioned by Frank, we will attempt to balance the agendas as best we can. I suppose we're trying not to, limit ourselves to only having planning in in the first part of the month and not in the second. Maybe we could say we'll attempt to, but in some cases we may want to put a planning item in the second meeting of the month, just so that it will balance the agenda and it's not too heavy. But it's entirely up to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just in response, I think that looks fine to me, and the fact that it does say primarily is good to me, because it does enable that flexibility, and I do hear that that's what's desired. But yeah, gives a little bit of an indication of thinking.
Thank you, Councillor Graham.
Yeah, just a process question, Madam Mayor. Are we going to debate Councillor Sullivan's amendment before we get back into this full debate on the item? We've done Councillor Lauder's.
Understood it was an alternative recommendation. So if this recommendation was not supported, then that would provide us with an alt rec.
So you're not treating that as an amendment?
No. Well, officers haven't treated that as an amendment. It's been
all right. Well,
included
I'll reserve
as
my
an alt
right
rec.
to speak.
Oh. Okay. Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks. That's how it was certainly written up, and it probably doesn't matter which way you do it. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So I did have a number. I mean, I'm a little bit open-minded about both scenarios. I think both have their merits and they also have their problems. And maybe I'm old-fashioned. Maybe I'm so used to committee structures after 20 years and found them to work extremely well that I don't necessarily rush to moving to be one of those councils that only has council meetings. Because all the ones that I know that only have council meetings, I find them to be perhaps not as open with community, and it can become quite daunting for community to attend council meetings as opposed to committee meetings, and particularly when it's planning matters. So there were a number of things that I've had concerns about. One of them, and I know these things can be changed through standing orders, by changing standing orders, but one of the things that we don't do at council that we do allow at committee is asking questions of presenters. Now, sometimes in planning committee, we might have a dozen questions to presenters, and we also even occasionally break standing orders and go back to them during debate after the motion is moved to actually just check with them, because we're kind of like workshopping the process. And planning is like that, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective. So those sorts of things would need to be seriously entertained at full council meetings. And my difficulty and my reservation is, and I won't speak poorly of my colleague who isn't here, but there are some elected members who naturally do not like planning matters. They do not like the debate and the workshopping that happens with planning matters, and get quite irate in the meeting when we do debate them, to the point of ordering quite regularly, and to the point of getting frustrated that why do these matters, why didn't you think about this before you came into the chamber? Well, the matter is often only presented to us as we come into the chamber. The issues are only highlighted because of the public comments that come forward, or the emphasis that is put on a particular aspect because of the public interaction that we get. So I'm concerned about that. I know that in the past, Councillor Archibald, Councillor Graham, myself, Councillor Jones would remember councils where suspension of standing orders was a regular occurrence, so that you could debate things. But we also had committees that were doing, we had 3 committees back then. They were doing huge amounts of work in advance of the council meetings, and we still needed to suspend standing orders to get through the business. For me, the issue comes down to, as I said before, it's whether or not a 2 council meeting approach is going to work is going to be really dependent on a whole bunch of things behind the scenes. So, for example, our current process of briefing sessions, the briefing happens on the Tuesday 8 days before the meeting, before agendas are printed, before we can actually see all of the detail. What the briefing that we currently get is, here's an overview. We can see a plan on the screen. We don't see the officer's report. We get a summary of the issues that might be coming up. And it's not like the briefing sessions that I think other councils have. So the agendas would have to close 2 weeks before the meetings, which makes it a little bit harder for applicants. It just adds, potentially another opportunity for them to miss being on an agenda, having already been in the system for 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 5 months, whatever it is. So that can be frustrating, albeit they might be able to then get on to the next one. So the briefing sessions themselves would have to be substantially different. I know I would need to see a full agenda and then have a briefing session to raise a whole bunch of questions if we're going to take these matters to full council. And so I guess that's why I have a reservation about going away from the committee system. I would say, in terms of the size of the committee, because it is a relevant question, my sense is over the next 2 years, if we stick with the committee, you would basically say there is a minimum of 1 elected member from each ward. That's a fairly small committee. I appreciate that. But I suspect there would typically be wards where both elected members would want to run. There will be wards with 3 elected members, where 2 elected members might want to sit on the committee. I certainly know it used to be infuriating for me on the council of 18 because certain councillors would block me from being on the committee. So systems that actually allow elected members to volunteer to do the hard work of council rather than either being in it or not in it would certainly be a good system, I think, because there are some people who naturally gravitate towards planning and there are others, not in this room, who naturally gravitate well away from it. So I just think it gives us a little bit of flexibility to do the hard planning work with the people that want to do it in a flexible way that doesn't really bog the full council down in doing that. So I won't vote for the officer's recommendation and hope that we pick the alternative. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Kamada.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I support the officer's recommendation. I appreciate Councillor Sullivan's insights, always valued. Look, this situation has been pretty much forced upon us, and we are now in an interim period. And I think it's a trial. We need to see how it goes and then make adjustments accordingly.
Short and sweet. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I'll be short and sweet too. I'm getting a hurry up here from certain people in the audience. Look, you know my views. At the IEM, I supported, I think Councillor Archibald wanted to give the planning committee a go as well. And there's plenty of reasons. Councillor Sullivan summed it up very well. But we've got 2 years to still have the planning committee in its current state. To say that this is going to, well, let's do it now because in 2 years we have to change then, well, don't worry about it. I mean, I might not be here anyway, but, I think for the betterment of the governance of this city and this council, you need a dedicated planning committee. As Councillor Sullivan said, you have councillors who, when I say enjoy being on planning, you do get some sense of enjoyment out of it because you're actually dealing with human beings who are building houses that we don't like and things like this. So we get a great respect for all different views. And if we lose that by going to committee, because a lot of the councillors mostly won't even be interested in going out to see site visits or have a look at it, they'll just see the officer's recommendation and perhaps go ahead with it. So I don't think you'll get that great debate. And I think the planning committee has worked so well in Fremantle. We should keep it for as long as we can, and if that's for another 2 years, let's keep it for another 2 years. So I'll be not supporting the recommendation on the table. And sorry, I got a bit confused before. And if this fails, I'll support Councillor Sullivan's alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Lorver.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to reiterate what Councillor Kamada said. This is not our choosing. This is being kind of foisted upon us, and things may have to change. And regardless of whichever option we go forward with now, we'll be able to fix it after 6 months. So that's a positive thing. Because no matter what we decide to do tonight, it's not going to be perfect. Councillors have raised some very good points about the ability to debate and ask questions, and I think the success of any model is going to rely upon our ability as a council to interrogate applicants with planning matters and likewise. And I think if that was extended to even other matters, would be even a more open council. So I'm willing to go with the 2 ordinary council meetings a month, with one having an emphasis on planning, just seeing how those standing orders and the meeting procedures change, and that might open up other items that may not have had so much debate. It might bring more debate to those items as well, which maybe we'll get back to being in council till midnight. I've heard stories about people sitting around until the next day. So, but we're Fremantle, and we do enjoy public coming in and having their say, and us having a nice informed debate. So I'll be supporting this, and if this doesn't get up, I'll be supporting the alternate recommendation, because either one, I think after 6 months, we're going to need to make some changes anyways. So, but I have enjoyed being on planning. Don't get me wrong. I just think that we should kick the tires on this and see how it goes.
All right, Councillor Archibald, you're listed next to speak, but you will close if you speak. So if you don't mind holding over until Councillor Jones and I have spoken. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I'll just comment on the fact that there are 3 people who definitely won't be here next time and 3 people who may not be here next time, and we've been asked to make a decision for the very few people that will definitely be here next time. And just for the benefit of people in the gallery, we're not allowed to abstain. We have to go to the toilet, but if we all went to the toilet, we wouldn't have a quorum. So I think there are two things that need to be resolved. I mean, obviously, having spent most of my life on the planning committee, we have a great deal of sort of appreciation of its usefulness. I think the two issues, and I agree largely with what Councillor Sullivan said, but I don't know that most of those things can't be dealt with by having the first meeting is primarily planning and the next meeting is primarily not. But the two issues that need to be dealt with if you go anywhere near a separate planning committee is delegation, because it's pointless having a planning committee if most things get referred to council. Maybe all right to have like a planning committee with no decision-making powers that kind of can thrash out and amend recommendations to go to council, but that's quite a different animal. So it's the size of it, and I don't think you can really go much below about 6 if you're going to have delegation, allowing for one person to be away, and you need 5 votes, or you need 4 votes. Sounds to me to get a bit thin if somebody's whole multi-million-dollar housing project is on the line. And then the other issue I'll just point out is that after the election, 4 of the 8 councillors will need to be JDAP nominees, right? It's 4 of the 8 councillors. So half the council will have to be JDAP nominees, which will involve a significant amount of understanding of the planning regime, the planning codes, the processes, because the processes at JDAP are quite different to our processes. They're much more formal and much more legalistic. And 2 of our more experienced members are leaving council, so that's a particular issue I think that needs to be dealt with. So I kind of lean towards the officer's recommendation, provided it is seen that meeting 1 is primarily planning, and we also make a lot of the processes less formal. I agree with Councillor Sullivan, that's a key part of the process, and I think all members of the planning committee take great personal pride and make a great effort to make sure we get the best possible outcome for as many people as possible, and that's not easy. And I would hope a full council meeting could achieve the same sorts of results.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So I'll speak and then go to Councillor Archibald to close. That was pretty much exactly the point I was going to make. I get really concerned that people come along to a planning committee expecting a decision. You've maybe got one person who's got stuck at work, one person's sick, or I'm, as the mayor, not available because I've got something else that I'm doing. And suddenly you've got either not a quorum, or if everyone doesn't vote for it, you suddenly find that you're showing up at another meeting to get the decision. So, or if the decision is made, it still feels uncomfortably small numbers of people to me to be making that decision. If we were to expand it out and say voluntarily anyone can be on planning committee, I kind of almost worry that then you sort of have 2 cultures within council. You know, once you start getting more than half, in a sense, in a group, then it feels like we're not kind of all operating as one council. And one of the things I worry about as well is that there is some effort that goes into briefing planning committee. When items then go through to council, there isn't that then same effort in terms of briefing the other councillors about those planning items. Certainly they can avail themselves of that information, but there's no regular cadence of briefing of everyone on planning matters. I think planning matters are only going to become more complex, and our thinking's only going to have to be sharper on them. As Councillor Jones has pointed out, we're going to need more JDAP members, and we're going to need, good debate to inform those JDAP members and help them consider their JDAP position. So personally, I think planning should be everyone's job. It is when things come through to council now, and I think going forward it's going to have to be a bit of everyone. I just wanted to talk to chairing of council. So all the points you've made are absolutely in front of mind for me as well. So I think, I'm very keen to move to other people moving and seconding so that I don't always close debate. And I think that gives us a bit more chance to kind of prosecute debate from the floor rather than it sitting with the mayor. It's really just a habit that Fremantle's had. It's sort of been as long as I've been here. It's been kind of like that, but it's nowhere in our standing orders, so it's really easy to change. I agree with committee-like discussion, and there are existing provisions under our standing orders to go to more committee-like discussion. I hadn't thought previously of the issue of interaction with the people in the public gallery, the applicants, in terms of planning items, but I think it is really valuable that we continue that on, and I've certainly seen the value in that in planning committee. Again, I don't see any barriers in our standing orders. I think that's just a presiding member decision. So, and committee-like discussion, I think having a kind of understanding, a shared understanding, nobody wants meetings to go on all night, but sometimes it is much easier to workshop something and come to an outcome where we can all agree rather than kind of just kick it along the road with no clear direction. So I guess from an external perspective, what I would like to see is that people come to a meeting to get a decision, and 90% of the time they're getting that decision because we have been able to collectively give it really good consideration. I think those ones that come up at planning quite often where suddenly on the night they say, oh, we want to draw up a new plan that addresses all of your concerns, and we knock them along to council on the next planning committee meeting. It's just as easy to do that under this system. So I feel really comfortable. I will be here after the upcoming election. I'm really interested and kind of excited to look at how this meeting could be chaired differently if it's twice a month. So, Councillor Archibald, to you to close.
Thank you. I'll just be quite brief about some things, but I think one of the things that has been said a few times tonight is that we need to have more councillors involved with planning. And at the excuse me, the IEM discussion that we had, my first preference is to have 2 council meetings a month. My second was, okay, if we have 1 council and 1 planning, that's fine too. I don't really, for me, it's kind of can work both ways. The one thing about having 2 council meetings a month, I found, particularly during the COVID period when we did run 2 council meetings a month, it was incredibly efficient. Things that were not quite right in one council meeting could be immediately brought back 2 weeks later to another one. So I really liked that efficiency, and I think it made us, identify what we needed, and you brought it back, and we could solve that problem. The one thing I also feel is that with the leaving of Councillor Jones and Councillor Groom, who were powerhouses in my view in the planning committee forum, I think with them going and a smaller number of people, despite having Councillor Sullivan to try and hold the fort, I think having more people learning about planning and picking up those skills will be really important. It's going to be a challenge for us, particularly with increased pressure in all the parts of the city that we know well of. So I think with some of the problems of how we can get the best out of planning discussions, that is, to me, really a problem that can be solved by amendment of standing orders and flexibility through the chair. I don't think it's a real problem that would stop us from running efficiently. The other thing is, if we load 1 council meeting with planning, the member who we haven't named who doesn't like planning can just not come to those meetings perhaps. But anyway, that's just an option for him. But I do think primarily more of the council needs to drive planning. We will be dropping another 2 councillors in 2 years' time. I think Councillor Jones is exactly right that we need to get on board with a new model. I think we all need to get very skilled in what planning challenges we'll be facing and to run with it. So I will support this motion, but of course, as I said in the IEM, if this doesn't come up, then obviously I support a planning committee as well. So for this, I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendation and against? So Councillor Sullivan, Vusic and Graham against. So that's carried. Cool. So we'll see in 6 months how it's going. All right. I'm not going to do the items on block because I want to draw out how long these elected members who are leaving. So I'll move. Well, in fact, I'll ask for someone to move C item 23103, the information report. Who'd like to move that? Councillor Moughlin, seconded by Councillor Groom. Any discussion on the draft annual financial statements? Councillor Archibald. No, Councillor Moughlin. Sorry, you had the call first.
Thank you. And yep, have to sharpen up on those chairing skills. No, mine's just a question to staff. So thank you for sharing the financial statements prior to them going to audit. So that's a really good thing for us to be able to view that and understand where we are at the moment. Just noting that there were some significant changes in regards to revaluations as part of that statement, and if we can get a comment from staff about that process, noting the previous finding from the Auditor General across all councils about the need to revisit that, and also then the implications for the city, both as part of these statements and the position of the city going forward.
Through the chair. So we're required to revalue our assets every 5 years under the Local Government Act. We were due to do that this year anyway, and it sort of coincided with the OAG flagging that finding. We went through the processes required by the auditors and the Act, and as a result of that process, the net asset value for the city increased from $448 million to $728 million. The revaluations carried out in that process are effective from 1st of July 23, so they'll have a greater implication on the current year. We did, however, capitalise a series of projects and assets in the prior year, obviously at those current values, which did increase our value of depreciation by about $1 million more than we had budgeted. So yeah, that's the general implication. We are working, noting that we did follow the process, the values are the values. We are looking at some aspects of the valuation and whether we might relook at them later in the year. But apart from that, yeah, we're working on that throughout the year, and we'll keep you informed on any major implications.
Thank you. Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. Just on the valuations, I do feel that it's something we do need to pay particular attention to. I mean, it's pretty amazing the result that's come back, but as we know, these numbers change. Of course, it's on the books. It's not real, but it could move around a bit over the next few years. So I think it will be important for us to keep an eye on it. But the other thing is that the values have been based on our portfolio. And I thought I might just ask, for example, a couple of buildings come to mind. I picked one that was old heritage, and then I picked the newest building we've got, which is this one. So I'd be interested to know what the specific values for these two sites are today compared to what they were before.
Sorry, the sites were this building and
newest, so this one, and I chose the Art Centre because it's almost the oldest, perhaps not quite.
Through the chair, I do have some of the values in front of me. So looking at the Fremantle Arts Centre, that moved from around 41.7 million up to 54.8, so a 13 million increase. And then the Wayalap Civic Centre from 62.9 million up to 82.6 million, so a almost $20 million increase for that asset.
It's clear which one's a fixer-upper. Councillor Vusic.
Turn it off, sorry. I couldn't resist this, given that this could be well my last comment on the finances. So I thought I'd give you some reflections on the draft financial report. And these are just observations. If I have a look at, say, page 196, it references Parry Street. I'm assuming you're referring to Quarry Street. There's on the same page, there's references to impairment of assets, noting 2B, which has nothing to do with contracts nor impairment. It deals with expenses. So when you go to 2B, you find that an interesting note there is that that the amount of money we paid the auditors in 2022 was 121,000. In 2023, we paid 301,000. That in itself indicates that we need to have a look at our resourcing of our finances, and it perhaps flags significant accounting and reconciliation issues. You know, the revaluation of city assets, I think we all picked up on that. It's huge. I think it's not quite a 5-year period. I think it's 3 years between the last audited revaluation. It was 5 years ago. 2018. Okay, so that's a huge revaluation. But when you actually go to page 199 and you have a look at the revaluation, roads increased by the roads in 2022 was 74 million. It increased to 91 million. The paths 27 million in 2022 increased by 13. Drainage 30 million increased by 17. The parks 9 million, a whopping 54 million. I mean, when you look at it, when you look at the breakdown, I just find this absolutely extraordinary. You know, for me, there's a lack of transparency on this, because what was the methodology used? You can do a desktop evaluation, which will give you a totally different result from a site visit and more detailed valuation. Because, you know, when you have a look at, say, Quarry Street Lane in 22-23 was worth 4.9 million, and 23-24 it's recorded at 4.5, which is a drop. Another observation, and that is what's contributing to our surplus. If you have a look at 2022, we spent 17 million on property, plant, equipment and infrastructure. In 23, we budgeted 27.3 million for these works and projects. We voted on a list of projects and works to be completed. It was my expectation that we would spend 27.3 million, but we didn't. We only spent 9.3. Now, our surplus does not represent additional income earned, but reflects the money that we have held back and not spent. And sort of this type of reporting, for me, is somewhat misleading and not helpful in understanding the true nature of our financial position. I suspect once Grant Thornton audits the draft annual financial statements, we may get a more accurate state of our financial health. I might say that this is the first time in 4 years that the city is asking elected members to approve a process that I don't think should come here. We could have a discussion about this in another forum, but I really don't think it should come here. The process is between the CEO and the OAG, and there may well be a reason why this year is different, perhaps to show that the city has complied with our timelines. So I might take this opportunity to give you kudos. You've made the timelines, and I think it's awesome that in December we should be able to have a report tabled to council, perhaps in January, which will give you an audited financial statement, which will be somewhat different. So given what I've just said, I can't support the recommendation.
Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm happy to take this on notice as well. And I too was pretty, pleased to see the valuations going in the right direction. That's quite good. And on my only question is about on page 210 of the meeting attachments, where it lists all the different areas. It has the parks going from $826,000, $391 up to $54 million as a valuation. And I mean, in my head, when I see that, I think, oh, they must be assuming a different use for those parks, like maybe housing or commercial. And so I'm just wondering, can you either take it on notice or explain to us how that valuation went up that much? And if so, I mean, I value our public space probably more than $54 million, but I just want to know why the number got to be that big. Thank you.
Through the chair, I will take that on notice and come back with some more detail, but it's most likely something to do with the unit pricing and values, but we'll come back to it with some more detail.
Councillor Groom.
Yeah, can I just say, ignore the valuations. We went through this circus 3 or 4 years ago. Everything went down. It was the end of the world. Council were doing their job bad. It's gone up. They'll go down again. Valuation is a dark art. No other word for it. If we gave the same portfolio to 3 different valuers, we would get different answers. So it's something we have to do. There's a lot of value put by it, but it really means very little for us because the majority of those assets we can't sell. So it's got nothing to do with what we're worth, how good our CEO is, the transparency or otherwise of staff. Like it's just a number. It's a rigmarole. It's what goes on. So, you know, we could spend a lot of time grilling staff about what those numbers mean. They didn't make them up. It's not their crystal ball. Who knows what was going on in the head of the valuers? And last time it was because there was a different methodology, and this time, you know, they're trying to decide what it's worth to community. You know, how dark magic is that? I note that the recommendation we're being asked to vote on is that we receive the annual report, so people can have their feelings about whether those numbers are right or wrong or whatever, but that's all that we are doing, and I'm happy to receive them. And again, congratulations to the staff for getting them out the door in this time frame.
Gosh, that feels like a good place to end this item. Councillor Sullivan? No.
I did just want to say that, I mean, in terms of valuations, I know Councillor Grimm said that you just ignore them. And Councillor Busick had a perspective of they're very important and we need to get them right. I think what we actually need to do is understand why government and accountants make us do these valuations and why they're part of our financial accounting system. And that is primarily, as far as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, so that we can also determine what sort of amount of money each year we should be allocating to the renewal and the replacement of those facilities, so that we can see whether we're budgeting enough or not. That's the conversation that we ought to always be having. It's a conversation the community would kind of like trying to have with us without actually understanding how to do it through this mechanism. And it is something that the council already has said quite strongly in the last 3, probably more years, that we haven't been doing well enough in this area and that we need to be doing much better at it. It was virtually the main reason why there was a large rate increase this year, was the recognition of that. So these numbers, these figures are really important. What this increase figure will probably tell us is that we've even got a bigger challenge in front of us in terms of spending the right amount of money each year to maintain, to renew, replace the assets that we all have. So I just wanted to get us back on that track of the conversation because it doesn't mean we're suddenly richer. It doesn't mean in the past that we were suddenly poorer or anything like that. It just means that we now understand how big the asset is, roughly, give or take, and how much we need to spend to make sure that we maintain that for our citizens.
Can you move this? Did you wish to close? No. All right. So I'm going to put it to a vote. All those in favour? And against? Councillor Busick against, and that's carried. The Library Information Report. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Archibald, seconded by Councillor Pemberton. Councillor Archibald.
Sorry, I just want to make one very brief comment about this because I'll just get my notes. Because when you read the report and you look at the last 6 months that was reported, the actual users who are going into our library, out of that total number, 40% of the users are not from the city of Fremantle or East Fremantle. I think that's kind of saying we're a pretty classy library. So I just wanted to add that little bit. Thank you.
Perhaps if I can add on to that as well, as the host of the State Minecraft server, I don't think we should underestimate our reach through that forum either. And I can't remember the number that I was given in terms of what we spend on running it, but I feel like it was $500 on a good year, give or take, maybe 800 now. I think they got a budget increase. And we're doing that for the entire state. So if you don't know what Minecraft is, ask a, 8 to 17-year-old, 8 to 16-year-old. And we host that here, and our staff are the lead administrators of that. If that's not a good reason to get more state government funding, I don't know what is, but it's just one of the many things the library are doing exceptionally, and on a pretty broad platform. Anyway, any further on the library? Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I keep getting more and more impressed by these reports that come to us, and I just wanted to give my congratulations to the staff and everyone involved, because it is really providing a valuable service. And Councillor Archibald's point just there also makes the point that we've managed to turn it into a destination in itself, which was a big part of the objective of this building. And I look forward to the time when you can also book meeting rooms in this building outside of office hours, so we achieve that important objective. I was very tempted to put forward an amendment that I knew was not really speaking to the item in order to reinforce that, but I'm doing it in a comment instead.
I look forward to us receiving your bookings as a community member, Councillor Pemberton. All right, so I'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. And believe it or not, that brings us to the end of our council meeting. Thank you for your patience in the gallery. I know your main interest was the finishing of this council meeting so that you could spend time with the good people you've supported. But that brings us to a close. And